Hello and welcome to the first week of a new video tutorial series for virtualracingschool.com with the global Mazda MX-5 Cup car as used in the Rookie Road series and runs the full season with entirely free content in iRacing. For week 1 we are at Summit Point Raceway, one of iRacing's first releases, but unfortunately it's not a personal favourite of mine. For such a short circuit though, it's extremely challenging to consistently get right, with each corner offering a real technical challenge where line and timing are absolutely critical to getting a good lap time. It's perhaps therefore an excellent challenge for those fairly new to iRacing or sim racing in general to get to grips with, especially in the MX-5, which is very well suited. So this is a fixed setup series, so I'm running the baseline setup in the sim, and we shall be looking at my best lap from an offline test session using default weather, with the time of day being the afternoon. So the lap on this occasion was my second of 2 flyers, so there's a couple more tenths available if I were to nail a first flying lap, which is generally when the tyres offer a bit more grip. For those unfamiliar with these tutorials, what we do is we play the lap through first and then we will go into further analysis. So that's what I'm going to do now. Just play the lap through for you from the last corner here. And across the line, so there was a 1 minute 22.394. So yeah, we'll take it back to the start or the end of the previous lap, just to show you obviously the importance of getting a good exit out of the final corner, just to give you as much straight line speed as you can to start the new lap, because you'll carry that speed all the way down to turn 1. So I've picked the throttle up quite nicely there. I've sacrificed a bit of entry speed, which has allowed me to get on the throttle really early, and it's all about the exit there really. Now you've got quite a long run down to the braking zone for turn 1, where there are some cones here on the left. Just brake before the second of the last 2 cones, which is extremely late. It's really surprising how late you can brake in this car, but it's obviously very, very light, and it's got slick tyres. It's also not the most powerful car in the world, so generally you're not carrying a crazy amount of speed at the point at which you do brake. But if we slow it down here, we'll just see that so obviously this is the third from last set of cones. So yeah, we want to brake in between the third and second from last. So obviously you've got 3 cones, 2 cones. So in between these 2, basically. Now, on your next few laps, as the tyres start to heat up a bit, you won't have quite the same amount of grip under braking, so you'll have to bring that back a bit, that braking point. So obviously, you know, if you are new, trying to brake this late is only going to end badly. But yeah, we're looking at you know, a decent lap here, so it's possible to brake you know, that late. And the car has ABS, but generally the brake pressure you'll need for like threshold braking is about 60 or maybe 70%. Try not to exceed that brake pressure if you can, because you'll just be overusing the ABS and wearing out the tyres quicker, and the car won't really stop any faster anyway. So yeah, it's good to get in a habit of finding your threshold braking, and you can calibrate your pedals if you have decent modern pedals to a point where it feels like you're braking quite firm, and you can calibrate that position so that it results in being 60-70%, so that you can feel comfortable threshold braking every time. So the other thing that I want to just talk about before we go any further is changing gear. So this car typically, well, obviously the real car is driven with an H pattern shifter and a clutch. I personally don't have an H pattern shifter, so I use the paddles on my steering wheel, and I use the clutch to shift up, and it's okay to hold the full throttle when you do this. There's no clutch wear or anything like that, so you can get away with it. But on downshifts, I choose not to heel and toe. I rather brake with my left foot and blip the throttle with my right foot. So it just works better for me. If you're not comfortable doing that, because it requires very good timing, basically you have to hold the downshift paddle, or you shift down with your H shifter, and then blip the throttle until the gear has changed, basically. If you let go of the paddle prematurely, then the car might not go down into the next gear, so you might be stuck in neutral. So yeah, you might be more comfortable using the clutch pedal on the downshifts and to heel and toe. You don't have to heel and toe. In fact, there are driver aids available in the sim, such as auto blip, but they generally slow down the speed at which the car changes gear. So if you really want to you know, be up at the front, you want to drive without those aids. So yeah, I would recommend always blipping the throttle, even if you are right foot braking, if you can, just because it reduces the likelihood of locking up the rear wheels when you engage the next gear. There's plenty of videos and tutorials on the internet to explain more about heel and toe technique, and generally the need to blip the throttle when you change down. Yeah, so with that said, so I'm on the brakes here, 60%, keeping the car straight, and I was a little bit late on the brakes actually this time. We just take it through. Now this is quite important, because I broke quite late. I want to be trail braking, and I've gone into detail about this with my GT3 series videos. But yeah, so in order to ensure that I'm going to make the apex, I don't want to come off that brake pedal until I've hooked up with the apex, especially given that I'm carrying a bit more speed than I'm perhaps generally comfortable with. So yeah, trail braking very, very deep, right up until the point where I get back on the power. Now this car doesn't have very much power, so you can afford to be quite aggressive with the throttle application, especially in this hairpin. So I've got the car turned where I want it to be. I've got quite a nice tight exit, which is helping me compensate for the late braking, which is nice, but obviously I did have to sacrifice some apex speed to achieve that tight apex. And then yeah, so bringing the car nice and tight over to the right as we come down towards turn 3, because turn 2 is kind of the exit of 1. Now approaching turn 3, which is a very tricky corner, basically if you turn in on the brakes, it can induce oversteer, which can be very difficult to control. And generally this circuit requires a lot of car control to really get the most lap time from, but we'll get into that a bit further on. So in terms of references, I mean, you've got this alternative layout, or it might be an access road on the right here, now, and then you've got another one just shortly after that before you before the apex. Now I tend to brake in between these two, maybe just a little bit sooner than the middle of the two, and it's a very, very brief braking zone, and we're not braking very hard, so it's important to carry the speed through this corner. We're driving quite an underpowered car, so it's very important to brake just a little bit and keep the momentum up. Get back on that throttle really nice and early, and open up the steering as soon as you can as well, to avoid getting too much oversteer on the exit. So here I'm only at about 30% brake pressure, and basically as soon as I'm turning in, I'm off the brake and just kind of playing with the throttle to get the front end where I need to be. Now obviously, because I am left foot braking, this is made much easier. I don't have to physically move my foot across between the pedals. Now it's quite important to be really, really nice and early on the power. Notice I'm at full throttle before I've even got to this curb. And secondly, it is important to hook up with this curb. So I'm right up on there, but notice how as soon as the car lands off the curb, I've straightened up the wheel. So we'll just watch that. So the car now lands and settles, and the front end will be loaded up as you come off the curb, basically, so you don't want to be steering in too aggressively at that point. Otherwise, again, you'll induce oversteer. So I've straightened up the steering for a nice clean exit using all of the track. Now you can allow a couple of wheels to go into the gravel. You can get away with it. On this occasion it was quite a nice clean and tight exit, which was good. So now we've got our run down to turn 4, which is a flat out corner. Notice how on the run down there we've got this extra bit of tarmac which I take advantage of. So I just straight line across there, across the inside, and give myself a nice wide entry through the right hander of 4, just to help me ensure that I can make it through here flat out. You want to avoid that curb on the inside if you can though, because it will unsettle the car too much. You want to get as close to it as you possibly can, but try not to actually make major contact with it. So I'm pretty close to it there. Now in towards my probably least enjoyable section. It's quite nice when you get it right, but unfortunately I don't get it right very often. So this corner is quite tricky. You've just come off, or the braking zone for turn 5, I should say, is quite tricky because you're coming out of turn 4, still cornering quite hard, pretty much right up to the point where you want to start braking. So notice there, as soon as I hit the brakes, I straighten the car. That's important. So I hit the brakes, I straighten the car. Oops, I've just taken it through. There we go. Yeah, so I hit the brakes and straighten the car. Now notice I'm only braking 50% here. It's downhill, and yeah, sometimes you're carrying a bit of sideways momentum through here, so you can't brake too aggressively. drop it down into second gear for the left-hander. Now notice I'm braking in the middle of the circuit here. That's another thing to take note of. And obviously the momentum from exiting turn 4 has forced me into the middle of the circuit. Ideally you want to be entering as wide as you can afford to be entering from, but it's a compromise because it's between two corners. So and they're kind of equally important to prioritize. So braking in the middle of the circuit here, turning in from the middle. Now whilst we're doing this, we're changing down into second. Now that's quite important. If you're not in second gear before you start hooking up to this apex here, generally the car will understeer and you'll struggle to hook up. It's very, as I've alluded to earlier, line around this section or this circuit, especially this section, is extremely important. So making sure that you're in second gear there is going to allow you to keep a nice tight line through this left-hander. So notice there I'm also just trail braking and then kind of hitting the throttle to maintain that turn-in. If I get into the throttle too progressively or gradually, it's going to induce some understeer. So you want to be quite aggressive on that initial throttle application, even if it means you have to then lift out slightly, because you are potentially going to be traction limited. And we can see there actually on the exit that I get a bit of oversteer. So hard on the throttle, bit of oversteer, but you can afford to just counter steer and catch it. It's more important to commit to that throttle and you know, just catch it with a little bit of counter steer if you can. Obviously it takes a bit of practice to get to that point. I'd recommend maybe you know, doing some practice at the, you know, just at the skid pad centripetal circuit, just throwing the car sideways and getting used to holding onto slides and catching slides. It's really going to help you in your iRacing career in general, but especially around here in this car. So exiting turn 5, you immediately want to bring the car all the way over to the left. Now I'm pretty much right up to the edge, not quite actually, but I am all the way up into third gear, and then just braking down again, very short braking zone, and dropping back down into second gear. Again, that's important. If you're not in second gear, the car won't hook up as well, and you'll get a bit too much understeer. But notice how I'm kind of trail braking on the entry here. Now it very much depends how well the car turns in. If the car isn't turning in so well, you'll need to trail brake a bit more. If the car turns in too well, then you perhaps want to separate your braking and steering a bit more, so brake and then steer, whatever you're comfortable with. But what certainly is the case is to hook up into this cambered patch of tarmac on the inside here. That's very important, because then that will allow you to maintain a nice tight line around here, and you've got 3 or 4 corners, including this one following. So very important to hook this sequence up together nicely and not be too greedy with your speed on the entry here. So if we just play that through, notice how I'm modulating the throttle there as I come round here. I'm also kind of seesawing away at the wheel a bit, and that's because basically I'm on the limit of traction throughout this whole section. So basically that's allowing me to get the most rotation without going overboard and getting too sideways and inducing oversteer, spinning up the wheels, etc. So we want to find a balance there. So that's why it's, as I said, important to have excellent car control through this sequence. So yeah, we're picking up the throttle nice and early there. We go to full throttle, we lift in between shifting up to third. I find that really helps me. If I power shift up into third, keeping it full throttle, it will shock the drivetrain a bit too much and induce wheel spin, which we don't want. So I'm just modulating the throttle at this point, still steering to the right. I say that, I've just caught some oversteer there, so the car is still turning to the right, but you may need to have to counter steer to catch some oversteer. So this positioning here is very important, because it then leads into 8 and 9. So we're just through 7 at the moment, and you want the car as close or even over this curb as you can, basically. So if we just play this through, so again I'm modulating the throttle because the car can get a bit out of shape as you come off this curb, keeping the steering nice and straight as well, and then bringing the car over to the left to give myself once again the widest possible entry into 9. Now 9 can be taken flat out, but it's all dependent, and it wasn't quite flat out for me on this lap. It's all dependent on your line through 8 and also your speed through 8. Now, so I've paused it here because there is a this is a very tricky section where if you drop your wheels into the grass here or onto this curb here on the left, it really pulls you in and can induce horrible oversteer. On this occasion I was just slightly wide of that critical zone, I would say, but also notice how I'm lifting out of the throttle, just breathing out of the throttle I should say, as I approach that area. So I do actually get a bit of oversteer there as well. You pretty much are always going to get oversteer through here when you're on the limit of grip and traction in this car. So a slight bit of counter steer there, bringing the car back over to the left again, but then notice almost immediately I aim for the apex for 9. So the turn-in point is going to be, if you want a reference, it's going to be just after this access road, basically. So after it ends and the grass resumes. So yeah, there I basically turn in to 9, and I'm not able to make it through there flat out. I have to bleed out of the throttle twice there, and that's because if you force yourself to go through here flat out, you're likely to get sideways. Basically, you're likely to lose traction even though we're in 4th gear, just because the previous corner has unsettled the rear end, and the car is just so lively through here with the circuit's unique sort of undulations through here. So it's quite a nice section when you do get it right, like I said. Now the other thing is this curb here. Now you can, obviously the idea is to get as close to this curb as possible, but in doing so you'll find that you will occasionally run over it. Now when you land, it's going to load up the front and you'll have massive oversteer, so just be conscious and aware of that. So on this particular lap I get quite close to it. I do just get the inside of my tyres in contact there, but I'm able to get away with it. So I'm also breathing out of the throttle at this point as well, so that's quite important. Essentially the goal here is to carry as much speed and momentum through here as possible, and so I've got the steering dead straight at this point, even though I'm still cornering. That's because the car is just a little bit sideways, which we might be able to see just there. So we can see that yaw angle of the car. So even though I'm steering straight, so it's almost like a 4-wheel drift here on the exit. Now it's important to open that steering up to make catching any slides, if you do get them, easier, and also to reduce the chances of them happening in the first place. So I've let the car run all the way out onto this exit curb, and we're pretty much using as much of the road as we possibly can get away with here. Obviously you want to avoid going all the way onto the grass. I do actually just pick up some dust as the curb ends on the gravel there, but it's okay as long as you're keeping the car nice and straight at that point. So we run down to the last corner now. I choose to leave it in fourth, but I hit the rev limiter there for some time, so I'm kind of in two minds there as to whether it's best to go up into fifth or not. The gain from doing so is probably going to be minimal, less than half a tenth, I would say, and it just creates a bit more work, some more things to get wrong as you brake for the final corner. Now, there are some references in the way of some patches in the grass for your sort of braking point here. Now, I pretty much brake fractionally, fractionally before, a couple of cars length before those patches start. And obviously the exit of this corner is quite critical, especially if you're in a race and the following laps count. So yeah, braking isn't going to be too harsh because you're pretty much turning in almost immediately. So if you're turning in and braking at the same time, one has to compromise basically. So we're only braking about 30-40% here as we immediately start turning in, but we want to carry a nice wide shallow line in so we can carry as much speed through. And there's also some nasty bumps as well, and this was quite nice for me. I just about had enough room on the exit, using all of that exit curb there, and also picking up the throttle twice there, so I had two attempts. Obviously you want to try and pick up the throttle as soon as you can, but I guess I felt that the first try was just a bit too soon, and it felt like I was just carrying a bit too much speed and I'd run out of track on the exit. So a couple of attempts there, but then importantly committing to full throttle and not lifting out again. So that's very important, generally speaking, that when you do get onto the throttle, it's a point at which you know that you're not going to have to take it off again. So let's just have a look at the line that I take there on the exit as well. So I let the car track all the way out over onto this curb. I'm even just brushing the gravel there. You won't get an off track for this. The service will allow you to do this, so take advantage of it and use all of the track there, because others will. And that's about it across the line. So yeah, good luck to everyone this season, and make sure, if you're not already, registered on virtualracingschool.com, where you can gain access to telemetry, replays and setups, and even book one-to-one coaching with top drivers from the likes of Coanda SimSport. Thanks for watching.